Welcome everybody. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us for this live event. This is the Squirrel 365 version 1.7 overview webinar. My name is Mel Shepherd. I'm the Chief Experience Officer here at Squirrel 365. And today I'm joined by Donald McCormick, our Chief Strategy Officer. We're recording this live event and it will be available to you all later today. And there will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, but I'd also encourage you to use the Q&A and chat panels during this session so that I can collate any questions and make sure we get them all answered at the end for you. Okay, let's get started. So we've got a ton of new stuff to show you today, and I'm extremely proud to be able to kind of show you what our design and development and product teams have been hard at work on for the last few months. You're going to be seeing new features, bug fixes and improvements to workflows. We're all about making lives easier where we can. And we've also been working hard to get useful content into the product for new users and seasoned Squirrel pros alike. So you'll see a new start page and learn about the framework that we put in place to support add-ons, which allow us to deliver beta or custom components outside of our standard release cycle. And it's something that I believe lays the foundation for a Squirrel marketplace in the future, if you like. So if you want to learn more about my vision for the Squirrel community and a marketplace where users can share components, add-ons, templates, etc., then drop me an email or reach out, because I'd love to share my ideas and collaborate with you on that. So there's quite a bit to cover. So I'm going to stop talking now and hand over to Donald. Donald, over to you.
Thank you, Mel, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. And I'm really excited to be presenting you version 1.7 of Squirrel. Now, this is scheduled to release next Wednesday the 14th. So when you start up Squirrel, then you should see the prompt to install the next version and be able to download it. So next Wednesday is the day you'll see this. So a 6-day wait to see the things you're going to see today, but hopefully worth that wait. So we're going to go through, I'm going to go through some slides for the smaller features. I'll just explain what they are. They're not really worth demoing, but more than a few demos we'll do of the new stuff as well, so you can see it in action. And but before we start, there are a couple of compatibility changes that we need to go through, just so you're aware of them. They're nothing major at all. They affect the slider and the value input, which is also known as the spinner. So the dual sliders are not supported in 1.7 for various reasons. We had to do quite a lot of work on the slider. We updated a lot of the infrastructure and frameworks inside Squirrel for 1.7, and that led us having to do some work on the slider, and unfortunately we weren't able to get dual sliders back in 1.7. They will be reintroduced at a later date. That is our plan, but they're not there today. So if you do have a desperate need for dual sliders, let us know. But we checked and we don't think that anyone is actively using those at the moment. But if you are, then let us know. The other thing about the slider is that it no longer has an end value, and the reason for that is we've done some work in 1.7 to start. You won't see it in 1.7, but laying the grounds for making things easier to line up. And the problem with the end value is it's spilled outside the bounds of the component. And so we have the slider itself no longer has an end value option. If you want an end value, you can just put another text label next to it and bind it to the same value as the slider. If you had text labels in a previous version, saved from a previous version, which you open in 1.7, we will automatically add that separate label and bind it to the same cell. So it should be almost identical, and it'll just be two components rather than one. And as part of all of that, the positioning of the slider, because it's now not drawing quite as much as it did before, the slider itself may move a little. You may need to do a little manual adjustment when you open in 1.7 to sliders on your project, but hopefully nothing too drastic, and should be less than 2 or 3 minutes to change it so that it is where you want it to be relative to other components in 1.7. Similar but lesser for the value input. For the same sort of reasons, the value input no longer has a label. So you used to be able to the value input can put numbers in and have a spinner and up and down arrows. All of that is still there, but the external label that basically says what the value is no longer part of the spinner. Again, you can do that with a separate text label, and again, projects that were saved with older versions will ultimately have that label added, so that it's there when you come in. But for new ones, you'll have to add it as you go. So they're the compatibility changes. So let's go and look now at the things that we've added. The first place to look is in the designer, and we made a few changes in the designer. As Mel said, it's about workflow, it's about making life a little easier. The first one is adding a menu to the toolbar, the alignment toolbar, to allow you to match height, width, and size. So these options have been available in that menu you see there in the size drop-down menu, in the arrange menu on the toolbar in the main designer, but they weren't available on the toolbar at the top of the property sheet that you see at the bottom there. But now you can see they are at the right-hand end. There's a little drop-down menu. The top one gives height and width, the middle one width, and the bottom one height. So without having to drop down the full menu, you can get to those quickly and easily from the toolbar. It's certainly something that I've often wanted to do when I've been building Squirrel projects. So hopefully it helps just that little bit smoother in the workflow. Second thing, we've been asked for this many times, and it's now here. It's actually here in two places. The first place that we'll encounter it is on the file menu, so on a recent files menu, so you can open recent files. Don't have to sort of go and hunt for them in the Windows file browser. They're just there where you might want them to get the ones that you've been working on recently. Again, not a big thing, but does sort of smooth out the workflow. The third thing, and this will be the first demo that we do, is extended redo, undo, and redo. So before we did undo, it really mainly affected what was on the canvas, but didn't cover the spreadsheet, didn't cover bindings. So if we come into Squirrel here, I can use my recents menu and say, I want my undo, redo there. So let's say I add a table here. So I'm going to add a scorecard, and I'm going to bind it to a set of data, this top set of data here. And then I go on and I'm doing all sorts of other things. Imagine it's a big project here. And by mistake, I sort of say, well, actually, I'm going to rebind this and I'm going to bind it to here and I bind it to there. That's a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. And I discover that later on as I come in here. You see, I've got some formulas in here. I delete these thinking it's bound to that. And oh no. I've deleted my formulas, I've bound it to the wrong thing, I've gone and done that. Yeah, it's maybe a bit of a mess. But the great thing is now I've got undo that goes across all of these things. So if I say undo, the first thing obviously undo is this in here. If I say undo again, then all my formulas come back. So I've got these formulas. So I've done this a number of times prior to 1.7. I've got a complicated formula. I hit a key, it disappears, no way of getting it back, or hit the delete key or something. So now you can undo. So I've undone that. So now they're all back in there. But I didn't want this table bound to those. It was originally bound to those. So I can undo again. And now it's bound to the top table there. And if I go back, it'll undo it completely and then take it out altogether. So if I, and of course, these are all on Control Z and Control Y. So if I do Control Y, it goes all the way back again to this position where I was, oh no, I've done all this, and Control Z will take me all the way back again. So hopefully that helps protect you against sort of slip of the fingers and deleting things that you shouldn't have or misbinding things. So you can redo and undo right across the canvas, the bindings, and the spreadsheet all in one. It all happens in one stack, if you like. So it'll undo them in sequence. It might undo some, as you see there's something in the worksheet, then a binding, then something in the canvas, but it's all natural and feels quite natural as you get used to it. So hopefully, again, that will save some time for things that you've done that maybe I have to sort of delete a binding or delete a formula or something and get it back relatively quickly. So that's extended undo and redo. And then the next thing is copy from debug mode in the designer, which sounds like maybe a small thing, but they can have it's very useful for capturing data that you get at runtime. And there are two main ways in which you can get data that are not in the sheet at design time but are there at runtime. And so what I can do is if I open my where is it, debug copy paste here. So what I've got is an empty project, but I've got a database query. And this is just pulling in some data. So if I run to debug, then I've got some data here. Now, what I want to do with this data is I want to filter it using a drop-down and then put the results of that filter into a table. So I come back to design and, oh, the data's gone. And actually, that's in a query in a SQL database, or I could go to maybe some other way of getting that query, but it's hard to get hold of it so that I can work on it in my project. Whereas now what I can do is I can highlight it when I'm in debug, and I do Control C, just done Control C there, come back to design, and now I can Control V, and it puts that data in the spreadsheet. So it's now there at design time. So now if I wanted to say, well, actually, I'm going to take these headers because I need to work with the headers. So now they're available to me to cut and paste across there. And I'm going to say, I'm going to add a drop down, and that drop down is going to take its labels from the regions here. And then it's going to do a data insertion that's filtered rows. And again, it's going to take this. And now I want to I'm going to copy, again, I'm going to, so actually going to put that destination into here, down to there. So now I can go into debug and say, it's going to select those in there. But once again, it doesn't have to be coming from a database. This could be the product of formulas, or it could be another data insertions. I can take this again and copy this and say, I've got this now at design time, so that I now know where to, exactly how big to make my table. So maybe I'll put a data table in there, and I'm going to bind it to that set of data. And of course, because I've got that data that I copy and pasted in there, I can now know what I'm doing. If I want to maybe sort of say in here, I'm going to make the text, sorry, the text white, and the background black, and then put a border around it like that, so that I can then update the formatting of my table. So now when I come in here, obviously I go on, this data is changing every time I click on the different ones here. So I'm getting my north, south, east, and west. Now I can, obviously, now that I've done that, I could go and maybe take out this data because I'm loading that all at runtime. So I just needed it there for design time. So it'll still work because it's loading data from the database, and I've got all of that. But that, just the ability, both from when the data was coming from the database and when I moved it through data insertion, it can be really, I mean, it's just so much easier to manage than have to find the data somewhere else, maybe by another query tool or something. And as I say, it's also the case if maybe I'm running a model in debug, I've got sliders and things like that, and I want to capture some of the output. Again, I can just copy and paste it out of debug and paste that maybe back into an Excel sheet or something. So it's sort of a really small thing, but can really make life easier at times in the when you're working with, particularly with data coming in from connectors. So then there are some improvements. That was the designer. So there are little things in the designer that make life easier. The big one being the undo redo. Now in the worksheet, we've added more that helps the process of building projects. The first one is navigation keys. I mean, in 1.6, we added control cursor keys so you can navigate across blocks of data, and control R and control D to copy up and down and things like that. When this release, we've added page up and page down, which makes it much easier to navigate up and down and across up and down a worksheet, and also control home, which will take you back to A1. So standard Excel and Google Sheets keys, but now work in the Squirrel worksheet, make life a little bit easier. The second thing is we have got rid of the rebind work. We've changed the rebind workflow, so you no longer get the "Would you like to rebind or clear" dialog. And again, it sounds like a small thing, but let me just come here and show you that. If you notice in the previous demo, I actually did it there. You may not have noticed, but let's say I've got a text label here, and I got some text and some more text. So if I bind this into the text here, then it's obviously some text. Can't stand that. There we go. Now, if I want that to go down to here, before when I clicked on this, it said, do you want to rebind or do you want to clear? It's gone straight into rebind. And so I can click on that and off I go. And so it's done. So again, I can't type today. Some more text. I can't type twice. Now, the interesting thing about that is, combined with one of the things we did in 1.6, which is to make the cursor keys immediately active inside the binding worksheet. So now what I would so one thing you can now do with all these things put together is if I come and just click on there, I don't move my mouse, I just use the keys. I push up, hit return. That's now rebound to the different cell. And that, when you've got a lot of bindings to do, maybe you're taking a number of sliders, say, and rebinding them to different things, or rebinding them to one thing under another, it really does make a big difference. You don't have to, you can just do it all with the cursor keys, click on the binding key, and off you go. Certainly, I found times when it saved me an enormous amount of time being able to do that and do more with the keystrokes and not have binding dialogues pop up when I didn't really want them. One thing to say is the workflow now for getting rid of this is I can click on this cross. I can delete this by just deleting it, or I can click on this cross to delete it. And if there's nothing in here, then when I click confirm, then it's unbound. So it's that's the way you unbind it if you want to bind it. But given that most of the time what you want to do is rebind it rather than unbind it, taking that dialogue out will hopefully save quite a bit of time. Then coming back to the PowerPoint, the last thing on the worksheet is we've added a formula builder. So this is the ability to be able to see the functions that you might want to add in the worksheet, very similar to both Excel and Google Sheets, and then also gives you the syntax for that. So obviously, if you don't, everyone talks about is VLOOKUP. I always have to look up the syntax. Well, you no longer have to look it up because it's here. So again, if I come in here, so for example, if I say equals, then I want to say left. Now I'm never sure whether it's three. I want the first three characters. Is it 3 and then the string, or the string and then 3? Well, what I do here is, well, first of all, I can go up and down these to see what they actually do. So I get a little description from each of these with the cursor keys, or I can click on them to see, but it's left I want, and then I can double click or hit return or hit tab to get it in there, and then it gives me the syntax. So then I can sort of say, I'm going to say Donald, and I'm going to take the first 4 characters in here. So again, it's telling me where I am in the very similar to both Excel and Google Sheets. And now I've got that there. So more help to be able to, again, streamline the workflow of working inside the designer and the worksheet to make things that much easier. So that's the sort of workflow pieces in the designer and in the worksheet. And then we've also made specific enhancements to individual components. Again, most of these have been requested by probably one or more of you on the call, and they're all fairly small, but together they make sort of big changes to what can be achieved and how easy it is to achieve it. The first one, and we've been asked for this a lot, is the ability for more control over animation. Now, there's plans to do more of this in the more fine-grained control in the future, but we've given at the starting point of this, and the first thing that many people, not many, some people say, I want to switch it off. So you can now switch it off. In fact, it's off by default. And then there are a couple of other things that you can do. So if I come back to here, I just come and load my open recent chart. So I have a chart here, and you see if I come in here, it just comes on. It's no animation, so that's the default. But if I come in here under general, I can say I want to animate it. The title there, I animate it. So I sort of show animation, and the default is 1,000 milliseconds, which is a second. So then if I do there, you see, oh, I need to turn it on. There we go. I see the wrong checkbox there. So if I turn on the animation, then we come in and it animates, and that's at 1 second full time for the animation. You've also got this new thing which I can show in sequence, which actually gives a slightly different animation where they build one at a time, one after the other. So I mean, it's just another option that might make it more eye-catching if that's what you're wanting to do. And also I have the ability now to change the time on it. So maybe I want 3 seconds instead of 1 second. So I come in here and it's slower. So you can make it faster or slower, depending on what you do. You can animate by series, or as I say, you can have it off completely, whatever you want to do. So that's the animations. And then the second thing we've done for charts, which again is something you'll be asked for, is the ability for the label orientation on a chart. This works on both bar charts and column charts. And sometimes you got the problem with overlapping labels, and there's nothing you could do about it before. But now what we can do is if we take these, you can see on the x-axis here, I can now say I want them horizontal, or I want them vertical, or I want them at 45 degrees. And that is possible now here and in a column chart. It's actually, sorry, in a bar chart. And it's probably more useful in a bar chart where you've got, because typically you have numbers along the bottom axis, they may grow to be quite long. And so you can use the same capability now on a bar chart to be able to do that as well. Again, things that have been asked for: value input or spinners, the ability to control the font and the size and the alignment of the overall styling of the value in the component. I won't demo that, but it's there should you need it. One that I was pushing for because I've found so many times I want to use it. Data mover is a great, just a fantastically useful utility function inside Squirrel. But one of the things that really sort of got in the way was you couldn't do it when a cell changes. You could only do it when a cell equaled another cell. So you'll see down here we've added that. We got a trigger cell now, so a data mover can move something when a cell changes, which is actually often what you want to do with data mover. So it's a tiny enhancement, but makes it just a wealth of possibilities to add there. And then a one-click option, but again, it can make a big difference, is the text input box now does real-time insertion. And this, as we'll see later on, some of the things that we're looking at with cloud databases, this comes into its own because you can now control what happens in the interface when people are typing things in. I'll show you what I mean here. If I come in and then I'll get rid of this one and then load up my text update. So here I've got, this is standard as it would have been in 1.6. So if I type hello world, it's going to post it into A1, and then this big text label takes its value from A1. So it doesn't update until I hit return. Or indeed, if I come in, you also could do it by sort of clicking outside and losing focus on the thing, but it didn't do it as you typed. So now what we've done is we've added this option here where data insertion, input options, update the value in real time. So now what happens when I do this, if I say, so that updates in real time. Now, just for updating a title like that, that might not be such a big thing. But one of the things I might want to do is if I'm taking input from the user, like let's say I'm taking something I'm going to write back, as we're saying, maybe to a cloud database, and I want to give it a name, and I don't want the name to be empty. So I don't want to take the action whilst the name is empty. Or let's say I want a name that's at least 3 characters long. Then I can do something like equals if that's the length of that cell up there is less than or equal to 3, then that's going to be 0, otherwise 1. So I got a little formula in there. And now I can see I've actually, you can see I did this more. I've got interactivity. And so this is now saying that when this cell is 0, make this disabled. So now what I can do is when I'm in here, if I type HEL, nothing happens. But when I send the second L, suddenly my button is available. So the user can't click it until they've done enough to trigger the interface. So it just stops you having to say, oh, is the input not there, and pop up a warning or something like that. Just the user can't do it until such times as they've typed enough in to make it. And you could do all sorts of things. You might want to check that for a duplicate in another list, so you can't use the same name. And there's all sorts of manner of ways of doing it. So a tiny little change in terms of just this checkbox, but can make a big difference, particularly when you're trying to use it in a sort of a more transactional way against a database. And then finally, for components, we've again, following a request from one of you folks, we've enhanced the PDF export in terms of the options you've got in the final PDF. So you can now control the password to open. You can also now add a password to change, and you can also say whether modifying the document, the final document, is allowed, and whether you can copy from it. Those are all capabilities of the PDF, but now you can enable those from inside the Squirrel interface. So on top of that, we have made numerous fixes. There's some here, there are more you'll see in the release notes when we release next Wednesday. Some things that I think a lot of you may have come across. The second one there, errors when exporting the spreadsheet. Now, there's sort of very few. It's very rare now for when you try and export the spreadsheet for it to have a problem. We fixed a number of things there. There was a problem with column and bar charts cutting off with negative numbers, both statically and when the data was updated. That's been fixed. Some chart properties you could bind but weren't changing when the binding value changed. That's been fixed. One thing I know a number of people came across is that even when you turned the chart cursor option and interactivity off, the crosshairs on the chart remained, which was often painful, but those now disappear with the chart cursor option. you can editing cells in a scorecard with 1,000 separator used to be an issue. Row and column functions, EO month function for getting the last day in a month. There's anything, yeah. A crash when a query returned no rows. They're just a number of things, many of which you could get round before, but actually were just a little awkward and in the way. So so we fixed all of those, and there's probably as many again, maybe 2 or 3 times as many again of smaller ones. And by all means, go and browse the release notes when they come out. So that's the main. They are the things that you will see when you get 1.7 next week. But there are a couple of other things I want to talk about, which are one of which is sort of in 1.7, one of which is coming soon, and I just wanted you to know about them and explain what they are and where they point away to the future. So the first one is add-on components and functions. Mel briefly talked about these in our introduction, and you will see these. You will see in the interface this new option at the bottom of the component insertion menu, which says add-on component. If you add it, you'll get something with a property sheet that looks like this. You'll also see an add-on function in the bottom of the functions drop down, and that will give you an add-on function property sheet like that. And to use those inside, you'll see this select. You can select which function you want it to be, or you can select which component you want it to be. At the moment, those menus will be empty. This is the starting point of, I think, something which will become quite significant for us over the coming months and years. As Mel said, initially, it allows us to maybe add a beta component or some specific requirement that we're quickly into the product without having to do a full release of the product. So we can do inside a release cycle, we can add things and test things out. So that's and that can, we can control that so that only certain people will see it, and so that you can, so we don't have to, not everybody has to see it and be sort of confused by it or have a big, we can send them specifically to different people, and people can help us test some that they're particularly interested in, or give us feedback at an earlier stage. So that's the first stage of using this. The second stage is it allows partners and possibly customers, if they are so inclined, to create add-on functions and components for themselves. Obviously, to do that, you need to have web development skills. So it's not like normal Squirrel skills, which are very much no code. This is a coding capability to create them. Obviously, to use them, you just pick from the drop down here and bind the properties, and off you go like any other Squirrel component. But so, and as Mel said, one of the things we want to do is to start having, is to grow this into a marketplace. So where probably mainly partners, but maybe some customers as well, will produce these and can publish them. Some will be free, some may be chargeable, as an ecosystem around Squirrel for different things. So that's as I say, it doesn't do anything in this release. It's just the infrastructure there. But in the coming weeks, months, and years, you will definitely see more from that. If anyone on the call is really interested in writing functions or components, then by all means get in touch, and we can talk you through the process and which sort of version of the product you need to do that, and all that sort of stuff. But it's there, and we're quite excited about what this is going to, the opportunities this is going to open up for Squirrel over the next period. And then the second thing, which I wanted to sort of flag, are cloud access to cloud databases. So obviously we have a number of ways of getting data into Squirrel at runtime. One is SQL databases through the InfoSol InfoBurst product. We can also get read access to Google Sheets and Google and Excel Online Sheets. But we set up partnerships with a couple of the online cloud databases, Smartsheet and Ninox, whereby these can act as a repository for data that is read into Squirrel, but also written back to Squirrel. And this opens up a completely new area of possibility here. It takes us much more into the no-code sort of app development world, as we have this sort of robust server-side infrastructure for being able to store data on a user-by-user basis. So what I thought I'd do is I'd quickly just show you this in action against a Ninox database. And so let me just show you. Oh, I can find it. Oh no, it's here. Sorry, wrong window. so if I bring this browser here, Linux is an online, completely cloud database. So here I've logged into my account. I've got 4 databases. The one I'm going to be using is 1.7, and I've got a little ratings table, which just gives me a product, a rating, a comment, and a date. And so we've added connectors. If I come back to Squirrel, what I've done is I've added these 2 connectors, so a read connector, and we'll look at the create connector in a minute. The reason I've added them in advance and not done it just from scratch is because I need to enter my API key and my team ID there. But once I've done that, then I can select the database. So that's the same database as you saw there. And then that table is the ratings table. So now I can say, well, where do you want to insert the data? I'm just going to put it in here to start with. And then, hey presto, that's come out of that's reading it real time from the cloud database inside Linux. So it's very similar in that way to Google Sheets and Excel online access, only it's like you call it a quote unquote proper database at the back end. But it also has update capability. So what I'm going to do is use that feature I showed you earlier to take this data into my design view. So if I paste that there, so you see I've also got a create, which will create a new record. So you see I've got create, read, and update. So read was the one that just got the data from the table. Create is going to add me a new record. Update can update a record that's already there. So I'm going to take these headings and just statically going to update it because there's no time to go into this. So Squirrel 1.7. The rating is, well, out of 5, I'd give it 11. Fantastic. I can't spell that either. And then put today's data in 8, 4, 21, like that. Right. So now I want to write that back to Linux. So I go into my create connector, and all I do is I have an insert, and it shows me what it should be like. It should give me the column headings and the values. So if I go and do that and put that on there, now that's going to refresh on load. So it will actually push it in when the worksheet loads, when the Squirrel project loads. So when I run it in debug, that'll push it in. Now, I wouldn't normally do that. I would probably have a button and put it on a refresh of a cell change. We've got. I'll give you details in a minute. We've got a webinar next week. You want to see this in more detail and how all that sort of works. It's standard Squirrel stuff, but this is just to give you a taster. So if I go into the debug here and then come back out and go back in again. Oh, why is that not going in? I haven't said which table I've got to write it into. That would help. So rating. So now if I go on there, you see there it's actually written it before it's read the data. So every time I run this, it's going to insert that row in there. So if I come back to my online, see, it's added these 2 rows because I ran it twice. So it's full round trip, read from the database, update something, read, create new rows. And in fact, so that's a very simple example. One of the things we'll go through next week on the webinar is I actually created a mini CRM system based on top of a few tables in Squirrel, whereby in Linux, where I can take a lead, I can progress it through lead, opportunity, customer, I can churn it, I can add a new one. So, and as you see, this is very much starting to think about Squirrel as a way of creating no-code apps, as well as sort of all the modeling spreadsheety sort of things that we do today. So it opens up an interesting new world. So that's Linux, and Smartsheet is basically a very similar. You do exactly the same sort of way you do it in Squirrel. It just writes to Smartsheet rather than Linux. So if you prefer Smartsheet as your backend database, then you can do that. If anyone's interested, you can register for early access. So this is not in 1.7. Neither of these are on 1.7, but they are available for early access. If you want to have a look at them, either of these 2 links, you can register, and we'll get back to you. Or if you're interested in what you can do on this, there is actually a recording of a Smartsheet webinar going through all of this, but we're doing one live next Thursday, building no-code apps with Squirrel 365 and Linux. Either you can type that link at the bottom into your browser, or you can go to our events page, squirrel365.io/events, and register from the link on there. So again, some really interesting stuff that is made possible by that. And so then that's almost us done. So that's the main features in Squirrel, the add-on component explanation, the Linux and Smartsheet early access, and there's one thing left to do. And given Mel has been so involved in the creation of this, we thought it would make sense for her to take you through it, which is the new start page and, as importantly, the new templates that we've been working on. So at this point, I will hand back to Mel, and she will take you through the start page and the templates.
Thank you very much, Donald. Yeah, let's go through these now. I just want to say as well, it's nice to see all of the stuff that we've worked on for 1.7 kind of outlined like that and demoed as you did so well. It always kind of makes me smile when I see how much change we're getting into the product. That's really good. Okay, so let me just take over the screen share a second. And I will share my Squirrel window. Excellent. Right. So, okay, so this is what the new start page looks like. Quite a departure from the start screen or splash screen you used to get within Squirrel. And what we're looking at here is kind of the licensed users view. So if you are a very first time user, so the very initial use of the product, or if you're you've got a trial license, so you're doing your 30-day trial, you get a slightly different view. And those are geared towards kind of onboarding and education, just to help people get up and running quickly. But for people that subscribe to the product, then this is what you'll see when you come in. So the first thing to note is we've got some navigation here on the left hand side for us now. And where we land when we start scroll up is on this home page, and the home screen's been designed to put all the sort of helpful actions at your fingertips effectively. So we can start a new project and we've got access to these kind of pre-canned device sizes. So let's say we want to design something specifically for mobile. We've got sizes for phone, tablets, and then we've got a couple of desktop sizes listed in here as well. Custom, I'm not sure if people knew this about the old start page, but custom, you can come and type in a height and width of your own choosing in here as well. So I don't know if anybody knew that was available previously in the product, but it is. And then clicking on either of the icons there will actually open with a canvas size, launch a new project for you with the canvas size preset to whichever was set in the drop down there. We've got some other options. We can now start by importing a spreadsheet, so that will open up our dialog, or we can open an existing project, which will open a dialog filtered to Squirrel extension files as well. One of the things I'm most excited about, it is the little things that get me excited, is the addition of recent projects. So you can see here now we can kind of jumpstart with one of our projects that we were working on recently, and that is available in the project from the file menu as well. And then also you can see over on the right hand side here, we've got the concept, we've got both recent Squirrel projects and we've got recently published. So I can see projects that I've published recently and I can either make them live or draft. I've got some options available to me here, so I can do this without needing to go all the way into the project manager. So hopefully this as a start page is going to be much more useful for people. The next option here, we've got templates. So these are entirely new to Squirrel in 1.7 and will essentially be like an expanding catalogue of template apps for people. So, and the purpose of these is just to give kind of a starting point or help people get to a place where something is working really, really quickly. So for example, let's say I know I want to build a kind of a value calculator. I can select this template and it's going to open directly inside Squirrel. So, straight away, I've got a working sort of model that can be interacted with. Everything's wired up. I've got this fully working model, but I can also then just quickly kind of go in and tailor this to my needs. Maybe I don't want blue, maybe I want red. So they really are that sort of starting point for applications. You can take them and modify them. Quite a bit of thought's been put into the structure of the templates. So to make them easy to work with, so we've got kind of like named objects in a meaningful way, and we've got notes about what each of the sheets that are in here are used for. Just to show you while I'm in here, there's our recent files, and if we ever want to get back to the start page at any point, we can get back to it from the help menu. And we're back here. So we've got a learn section now. So this is just going to give us access to kind of educational content and materials that you can get at these directly from within the project. Now they'll open in a tab in your browser so that you can kind of follow through the tutorials or that read that educational content whilst working with the Squirrel file as well. But yeah, we've got kind of the key core concepts that you need to get started with Squirrel. We've got help with. This will take you to a list of kind of online help for components, functions, etc. We've got hints and tips, and then we've got information about previous webinars, so you can go and watch the recordings, and also kind of educational blog content too. We've got the project manager is now directly accessible from the start page. So if, for example, you just wanted to come in and check something about one of your published models, you can do that without needing to go in to the designer via the file menu. And the last thing to mention is the What's New section that we've got here. So in this one, I will click on that. You'll notice we've got the little sort of yellow notification icon. So if anything new has been published since you visited this page last, we can kind of notify you and highlight you, draw your attention to the fact that there's maybe something new or useful for you here. And then really within the What's New section, we're putting information in here about new releases, upcoming webinars, new feature blogs, etc. So yeah, always worth checking that and keeping an eye on that little notification icon. And that's it. That's your kind of whistle-stop tour. If you just want to get the start page out of your way, you can close it with the icon there. But that is, in essence, exactly what we've done with the start page. So yeah, Donald, we've had a few questions in. I think we can go to sort of Q&A now. Yep. Let's have a look. So we had Ziv has asked, with the work we've done on the slider, have we improved the slider performance in 1.7 or done any work to reduce latency? Have you got any insight into that?
So the answer to that is sort of yes and no. So the slider itself isn't the introduction of latency. The slider, so we've done nothing to the slider itself that would do that. However, there is some latency introduced in other aspects. So if you've got an enormous spreadsheet model and you're driving it with a slider, it's going to take a little time to calculate, and that introduces latency. So there's so that's still there. There've been no changes to the spreadsheet engine to speak of in this release, so that wouldn't have changed. However, there was an issue where charts sort of hesitated on their first drawing, which often felt like a hesitancy in the slider, because the slider, you move the slider and the chart didn't move. It was the chart's fault and not the slider's fault, and that has been fixed for 1.7. So it's definitely still possible to have sliders that feel like they're not updating as fast as you might like, and it's largely usually to do with the complexity of models. But if you have if you're updating values which update charts, then there's a significant chance that it will be better in 1.7 in the first time that you do it, because, as I say, there was a redraw happening that didn't need to happen, which we've taken out.
Makes sense. Okay. We had another question in from Debbie. Debbie asks, can you undo past a save command? Is there a limit to the number of undos that can happen? I did take the liberty of pinging the devs while we were on the call to get some information about this, Donald. I don't know if you so I was gonna say the beauty of having access to the devs. If they've come back to say that that you can undo back beyond a save. So doing the save command doesn't essentially clear out that undo stack. And just some clarity around it for me, that they said the only events that clear out the undo stack is if you import a new spreadsheet, that will clear it out. So you'll lose that history of undo redo. If you go to file new, that clears it out. File open clears it out. And if you delete a sheet from your spreadsheet, that does. But yes, you will be able to undo beyond a save command. So I've not tested it.
The other part of that, well, is that at the moment there's no theoretical limit to the number of undos, but we are watching that carefully, because obviously if you took a top million cell sheet, I wouldn't advise you to have a million cell spreadsheet. If you have a cell sheet and you delete all those, it has to store those, so it does build up sort of. Now I've been using it in normal circumstances for weeks now, and never had an issue. But if somebody does come across something that sort of seems to be causing slowdown or something, as I say, we haven't come across that, but it could be. We may have to introduce a limit to it in future if things creep in. But at the moment, there's no hard-coded limit to the number of undos you can do.
Excellent, thank you. Another question we had, Ziv asked, are there any plans to provide export to, option for Google Slides?
No, we have no plans at the moment. I'm aware of. Mel, you can comment on that as well. There's one thing that we can't do. We looked at. So we have this capability of embedding a cloud-based Squirrel project into PowerPoint, but the mechanism for doing that is provided by the cloud version, by the cloud add-on infrastructure of PowerPoint, and there is nothing. So we've looked, and there seems to be nothing similar for Google Sheets. So those interactive ones in Google Sheets doesn't seem to be possible. And although we could do some sort of static export to slides, but there's not currently on the roadmap.
The roadmap, no, I'd agree. And we did some research recently into Keynote as well to see if we could do an equivalent integration for Keynote as we done with PowerPoint, and that's not possible with the way that Apple have that kind of infrastructure and ecosystem locked down also, but something we can definitely keep an eye on. Also, is it possible to set the dashboard to scale on width rather than full screen? This helps to preserve font size. Question.
No, what we do today is we scale until you hit you scale it until you hit the height, and then we stop, or you hit the width, whichever you hit first. And the reason for that is because we scale with the aspect ratio. If you don't scale with the aspect ratio, then things become distorted, and so it stops the first one it hits. One thing about scaling that we have done is when exporting to the cloud in 1.6, it had to scale, but you can now turn that off in 1.7. So you can do if you export locally, you have the option to scale or not scale, and we've now introduced that option to not scale into the cloud version, cloud export.
Absolutely, which will facilitate things like, I think I had an example in here when it loads up, so we can do kind of like these long, maybe either sort of kind of single page long websites or infographic style projects, that sort of thing. So I know whilst we had the forced scaling, they were proving a challenge, but that is resolved, as you said, in 1.7, which is good. And then the last question I think we've had in, any plans to add a sort function similar to the data mover? So I think we're talking kind of sort functions and aggregate functions in general we've got on the roadmap. Do you have anything to add to that, Donald? I know we've considered it.
No, it's something that we've thought about. It's certainly, I mean, one of the interesting things is that would be a candidate for doing for using as an add-on function. So that might be possible to do that and sort of roll it out sooner. But currently, no specific plans to do that. But definitely, both sorting and aggregation are things that would be good to do.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, fantastic. I mean, that's all the questions we've had in, so I hope that's been useful for everybody. Donald, thank you ever so much for your time once again.
No problem.
And thank you to everybody that's attended. I hope they found it useful. We will get the recording out as per usual later today. So thank you very much, everybody.